Testing, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Presenter for this afternoon, Information Technology Professional, Mr. Lyle Waldron. First Vice President of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, Mr. Marlon Seals. All other national officers elected and appointed. Colleagues in education, good afternoon and welcome to TTUTA's third edition of Sunday School, entitled Google Classroom or Zoom, What is the Real Question? As we celebrate the month of the teacher, the Professional Advancement Committee, under the astute leadership of Mr. Marlon Seals, will be providing the membership with the relevant and accurate information as we navigate through this new territory of online and distance teaching. My name is Eka McPhee, and I have the distinct pleasure of taking you through this afternoon's program. Now I invite the first Vice President, Mr. Marlon Seals, to bring greetings. Take it away, Mr. Seals.
Thank you, Ms. McPhee. So again, I welcome you on behalf of all the national officers, both elected and appointed. We welcome you to this Professional Advancement Committee production, Sunday School, where we have these professional conversations with things that are basically on the educational landscape. Thank you for giving us a moment of your Sunday. We recognize that work-life balance is very tenuous these days, but we really appreciate the hour that you are devoting to your professional advancement. Again, I will not spend much time, but I will like to give me the opportunity to welcome my team, the members of the Professional Advancement Committee. You would have heard Ms. Eka McPhee. Also in the room, we have Ms. Alison Commission, Month of the Teacher Representative, Anissa Mohammed, Avanel Etienne from the St. Patrick District, Mr. Kendall Kittle. Also in the room, we have our second Vice President, Ms. Kurla Robertson Thomas. Also joining us today, Ms. Katie Beckles, the General Secretary of the Association, and also on duty today is Mr. Braden Roberts, the Tobago officer. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand the floor over to the MC for today, Ms. Eka McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Seals. Our presenter this afternoon is Mr. Lyle Waldron. Mr. Waldron has worked as a higher education information technology professional for approximately 20 years. He has worked as the manager of multimedia audiovisual services at the UTT and as the chief technician for the School of Education at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Mr. Waldron's responsibilities include overseeing information technology and audiovisual strategy formulation, implementation and support for teaching and learning, and designing learning spaces for both physical and virtual realms. Mr. Lyle Waldron holds a Master's in Business Administration and a BSc in Computer Science with honors. Mr. Waldron is an Infocom affiliate member and is CTS General, CTSD certified, and holds a number of additional professional certificates, ranging from a range of manufacturers, including Poly, Smart Technologies, and Creston. Let us now welcome Mr. Waldron to our virtual podium. Welcome, Mr. Waldron.
Eka, good afternoon. Thank you. Every time I hear that list of things, I wonder how old I am and how long I've been doing this. Firstly, let me say thank you to TTUTA for extending the invitation, and many thanks, Marlon, as well. And hopefully, we continue to be able to create good structures and get some good information to folks. I again want to thank everyone, as Marlon just did, for coming out on this Sunday. I've not had my Sunday lunch yet either, so sacrifices shall be made for the greater good. Lastly, hello to everybody who I actually know a few faces here, which is kind of scary. Miss Borin and Nola and a couple other folks. So let's get straight into it. Today, the broader top, the heading of headings, will boil down to Google versus Zoom. And it's a conversation by itself that in many ways I thoroughly dislike having because it situates and it begins the conversation about technology in education around technology first and not pedagogy first. So a long time ago on a planet far, far away, folks, I was sitting in a place called School of Education, UE, and looking around at many colleagues and compatriots doing what they did in classrooms that at the time I managed. And I really was dismayed by what we were doing at the time, and I say we plural, not we us as in School of Education, but perhaps what we were doing as an institution in terms of the design of and acceptance of technology. Now, at the time, this paper was done through the lens of physical learning spaces like classrooms. But something really interesting and in many ways untoward has happened in the past couple of months or year or so is this thing called COVID, a whole global pandemic. That's fundamentally altered the way in which we all have to interact with each other and interact, of course, in terms of our professions, teaching and learning and whatnot. And in many ways, it has forced upon us or hoisted on us a kind of a revolutionary change that is not very common anywhere at any point in time. In weeks and days and months, decisions had to be made that we're still wrestling with the answers to some of them now. So in some ways, we're going to get to this answer of Google versus Zoom primarily through the lens of taking a look back at the correlations that I had at that time. So let me just go through this very quickly. It's not going to take us too long. I want to start with a quote from a gentleman named Richard Feynman. Don't mind the text is cropped out to the bottom there. For successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. We seem to at times put the best foot forward, think positively, speak positively, but we've not really assessed what's right, what's wrong, and what's in between. And in many ways, the failures that come from it. And there's really little that we could do to fool ourselves or our kids or their parents. So as I took a look back, we said, okay, fine. Are we at the time, and I'm higher education, so this was not secondary or primary at the time, are we technology oriented or learning driven? So this is through the lens of physical learning spaces. And there's a big note I have about virtual that has come back in many ways to haunt all of us, so myself indeed. The 2008-2009 discussion centered around the questions about the incorporation of technology and the illusions of progressiveness. So at the time, if you had a projector stuck on a wall or a ceiling somewhere, then you had technology in the classroom and teachers could teach. What I was noticing is that nobody was speaking to teachers. Nobody was speaking to students. Was there any value to having that projector bolted on a wall somewhere? That question was not being answered. And in many ways, I had many faculty, many teachers around me that were literally complaining that they were being put into this technology box that really was not working out. In many ways, from consultation to the design process to the end, what has happened, and it started slowly as creep, I would say about a decade ago, is that you all would say, hey, look, we have some really innovative, cool teaching we'd like to do. And some technocrat somewhere says, sure, here's a projector, put it on your desk, see what you could do with that. So that technology box continued to proliferate. Now, with the global pandemic, it has come to roost. Those eggs have hatched and everybody's roosting. Because now what we've had is a situation where one day we were kind of all told, okay, you're teaching online. And that then meant what really? We're not too sure, but we're going to have a discussion about that. So there is this deception, or there was a deception at the time, of forward strides in the practice of teaching and learning because of the illusion of progressiveness, right? So at the time, we were using the design of learning environments as the point of engagement. Again, situated in higher education, the paper was suggesting that the primary focus for colleges and universities should not be on technology or technologies or technological products, but rather on learning as the primary product with technology to support it. In many ways, we have found ourselves stuck in education in a cycle akin to a bakery that, if we ask what is the primary or the core business function of the bakery, it's to make bread, maybe some pastries, maybe some cakes. But some technocrats somewhere decided, hey, look, you all have a brand new fleet of vans to deliver bread. We know the ovens are not working, but don't worry about the ovens. We just need vans with great signage, and we can do some ads on TV, and we'll market, and everything will be fine. We found ourselves in that doldrum sometimes in education. It's kind of scary. And the paper as well discussed the peer framework. I want to take a second to look at what that was. Linda John, Amy Whiteside, Anne Hill, posited that it's critical to pair up to design learning spaces. Or what did they mean? According to these three ladies, to pair is to partner to form an interdisciplinary pedagogy-rich design team, assess how your learning is influenced in new learning spaces, integrate ideas from as many disciplines as possible to innovatively design these learning spaces, and to continually, I will try to add that in there, revisit current views on emerging technologies, diverse learners, strategic issues, course design methods, and whatever are the new findings we have in learning science across the board. So let's bring this forward. Let's shift this out from 2009 to 2021. Are we technology oriented now or learning driven in the midst of this pandemic? So I'm saying that, well, it looks like we have incorporated technology and we've accepted the illusion of progressiveness. So in the morning, you all are going to teach with Zoom, Google Classrooms, whatever else you find. Good luck, by the grace of God. Let's hope this works out. There's an appearance of forward strides because if you ask administrators at the highest level right now, they will say to me dangerous things like, we are currently teaching online. I'm not too sure how true that is. When we get to the question and answer segment of this, it's something that we should hopefully be able to robustly discuss and dissect. It's really, to me at least, and I mean, I'm kind of giving away the surprise here, but it's really more of an illusion than a reality in many ways. So now, using the design of learning environments as a point of engagement, I would like to suggest that the primary focus for us all, should not be on technology or technological products, but rather learning as a product. And again, I'm kind of giving away the end here with Google or Zoom. We'll get to that. All right, so pair, here. In the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, if we apply the framework of pairing up, did we partner with our teachers, partner with parents, partner with whomsoever we needed to in an emergency session or sessions, plural, ongoing, I may add. Significant investments are being made or have been made right now. Whether things are working, not working, sites are crashing, not crashing, the reality is we've had a significant financial investment in particular technologies. Did we do that through our partnership? Are we looking at that partnership now moving forward? How are we going to build on the investment and continue to make this thing better going forward? So did we do that? Are we assessing how learning is influenced in these new learning spaces? Without data, can we really look back on a day-to-day, almost week-to-week basis and make adjustments in real time? Because in many ways, I hate the metaphor, but I'm going to use it as cliche as it is. We are building the plane while it's flying, all right? Have we integrated ideas from many disciplines to innovatively redesign our virtual learning spaces? How many stages on this peer framework have we really managed to knock off? And have we revisited current views on emerging technologies, diverse learners, etc.? In many ways, this has not been done, and that is not being laid at the feet of teachers. Definitely, it can't be. I will allow you all to think creatively as to whom the bell tolls in that regard. So Lyle, 800-pound gorilla in the room, learning spaces, what learning spaces? We're not physically going to classes, we're not physically there. But just to be a little pedantic, learning spaces are all spaces, physical and virtual. There was a time when they would also be classified as formal learning spaces and informal learning spaces. And at least in higher education, it was quickly debunked because you can learn from standing behind a faculty member in a line to get some food in KFC. You can learn from a peer at 8 years old as you're running around primary school and you trip and fall. You just learned not to run there, even though the principal said 16 times for the morning, do not run. So learning takes place everywhere. But again, to be pedantic, whilst the paper itself focused on the physical learning space and was niched off to higher education, it seems as if the principles are easily juxtaposed with our current design or lack of design, depending on how you look at it, in our virtual learning spaces as applied. All right, so just again to go through this very quickly, just in case, don't take my word for it, learning spaces encompass the full range of places in which learning occurs, from real to virtual, from classroom to chat room. Malcolm Brown of Dartmouth College. Now, this is an interesting point that I pulled out of the paper. Of all the things I pulled out of the paper, this is probably the most major thing that I did. In 2008, 2009, the paper did note that while learning institutions in TNT are moving to greater reliance upon virtual spaces as arenas of learning, there remains a divide between institutional infrastructure and students' resources outside of the classroom. This is, reading this over 10 years later for me was a wake-up call. In many ways, whilst we've had a proliferation of digital devices, primarily in mobile tech, cell phones, couple tablets here and there and whatnot, Trinidad and Tobago has not, even with the infusion of laptops in 2010 to 2015, we've not really come to assess realistically what student resources were and are for an endeavor on this scale. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on where you stand on that side of the fence, it's out of our hands. This was a had to be done. We have to get the numbers down, clamp down, deal with hyper-contagious virus in the absence of any form of medical treatment or vaccine. So there is no option but to do this. But what we immediately found out, some homes do not have a computer, do not have internet access, may have one cell phone or two cell phones for 5 people in the home, mother, father, 3 kids. May have one cell phone in the home, single mother, 3 children. She's working, whether it's a high-end job as a lawyer or a service industry job in KFC. She's out of the house for 8 to 10 to 12 hours, and there's one device and it goes with her when she leaves. This digital divide in many ways has widened. How then do we design a space, a platform, a system, a thought, a concept that can take into consideration that real world situation? And I mean, I would easily lean on the fact that that should have been done before we, flick the switch. But here we are. Has this changed? I am going to suggest with everyone here, the answer is no. I've adopted a couple primary schools over the past few months and provided some guidance and consulting and advice. And the stories that I heard about some situations for students turned out to be 10 times worse than what I sat and envisioned in my thought processes and reflections. So if this has not changed, then how can we get to the point of debate in terms of the granularity of technologies? I'm not too sure. All right, so coming on to the end. Bill Gates, brilliant guy, they say. Yeah, brilliant guy. Let me not be facetious. Brilliant guy. The first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second rule is that automation applied, you can't see the rest. Automation applied to an inefficient operation magnifies that inefficiency. I know this almost by heart. All right. So that is something that has not been dissected or really thoroughly discussed. And in no way, shape, or form is it a condemnation of the technocrats at the highest levels of our education administration and leadership. But what it is, it's a hard, reflective look internally that needs to be done if it's not being done right now. Again, as someone on the outside looking in, both in terms of my space and place being higher education, and not secondary to primary, but also as somebody looking from the outside in to the ministry, so that at best we have a communications crisis. Because what it means is that the average man or woman, father or mother of children, is unaware of what the ministry has been doing, is doing, in the process of doing, to craft and create this space for the children, which is at the end of the day what all this is about. So just one last look back. What were the questions from the original study? Are learning institutions operating with an approach that focuses on outfitting classrooms with gadgets? Are learning institutions working with an approach that focuses on the design of classrooms and labs solely driven by space needs? It was something that I was coming across time and time again in almost all of my interactions in higher education. It would not be driven by educational needs or student needs. It would start and end with how many chairs could we put in the room. Learning institutions using an approach to space design that focuses on learning as a return on investment. So yes, we have to spend this money for an LMS like Moodle, or we have to spend this money for Canvas or whatever technology or tools, Google Classrooms, the G Suite, for instance, or Zoom or whatnot. But if it's seen as always a sunk cost capital expenditure, something that we have to spend on but we really wish we didn't, how can we then say this is a year-on-year investment, or are we seeing that at all? What is the current dominant approach to learning space design in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago? So I've updated these questions for the now, and hopefully from these questions we could really begin to take a direct look at Google Classrooms or Zoom. And in many ways, everything in between. Have our learning institutions operated with an approach that focuses on a single mode synchronous talking head instruction via video conference? What is the approach that is driving institutions in the design of their virtual learning spaces? I would, as a sub-question, ask, have we designed a virtual learning space? Or have we, in a very ad hoc manner, tagged extra things we need because we see gaps? So if we put teachers to sit for 5 hours in front of a screen here, we acknowledge that some students don't have access to screens, internet, or computers, so let's do some packages or something else. We'll see. Our learning institutions using an approach to space design that focuses on learning as a return on investment. Is this all a short-term response for the pandemic because of the pandemic? Or is it being seen as a transformational opportunity to invest in the future of what education could be? In many ways, I'm not a foreboding person. I can't tell the future. I'm not Nostradamus or the nice lady from Venezuela. But I think it's reasonable and certain to say that as we are where we are currently, community spread, the petri dish in North America above us, our borders are still closed, but at some point they're going to be open. Our caseload is not getting any better, and we, as I said, science has not provided us a shield just as yet. If I was someone planning for January, I cannot plan, and I've heard this in circles that I will not allow you all to quote me on. But part of the reason I understood, for instance, broadly in higher education, so there I could broadly in higher education, I've heard administrators and technocrats say, well, we didn't think that we were going to have to go online this semester. But if you're a resource planner, you would recognize that global pandemic, not epidemic, pandemic, it's global, hypercontagious virus through close range interaction, no vaccine, no medical treatment. If I'm planning right now, today on the 18th of October, I'm planning for January to be online again. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but that's what planning takes into consideration. It takes into consideration worst case scenario. The number of life vests on a boat is correlated to the number of seats on the boat. It's not correlated to the number of people on the boat on that day in theory. I mean, I guess it could be. But it's definitely not correlated to, well, maybe the ship wouldn't sink, said the Titanic. And the rest is history. So these are the questions for me that are there in the now. And then from all of them on the top level, what is or was the current dominant approach to learning space design in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago? Are we really going to boil this design down to a platform, and how? And should that be done at the level of schools? More questions there than answers, but I will let some of that come out in our Q&A. This is controversial but important. It must be said. And usually I am the person that would say these things. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. One of the things I have seen over 20 years in higher education specifically, and this is something that I've presented in the States a couple of times and whatnot, and the response has been amazing. The truth that it rings, it's actually quite scary. We've discussed this now, I would say, over 10 years at formerly EduCom, now UBTech conferences, University Business Technology conferences. And I've almost gotten to the point where I'm about to do data collection for a formal study. There are two kinds of IT support teams in education right now. The ones that are still living in the past, that are trying to create their fiefdoms and extend their budgets and think education is there to serve technology purpose, buying licenses and software and platforms. And the other that understands that technology is a utilitarian measure that is there to support education as a learning process, and that is there primarily and solely in that function. So in many ways, they're responsive to the needs of educators by reaching out to them, consulting with them, speaking to them, working with them. Of course, as technocrats, we contemporary Okra, we know what's going on in the field day to day. But as educators, make no mistake, there are things you all know and understand that no technocrat does. Even ones that I know of late have a rush to do masters in education so that they can have a seat at the table. But this is really something that the expertise of the teacher, and in this case, TTUTA as the collective, needs to have a very, very big chair pulled up at the table for discussion. So we get to the end. I will give the first question, which carries us back to the first question. Google or Zoom? Okay. I was in a training session about 2 months ago, where at the time the fight was between Teams and Zoom. Most institutions in higher education being Microsoft shops. So that, we have partnerships with multiple companies, Microsoft being one of them. And Microsoft being who they are, they've bundled their collaboration platform as a part of their O365 bundle. So out of the 70-something schools represented out of the state of Florida, fun fact, UTT is in the state of Florida for that company, so I don't get a Latin America rep. It's a long story by itself. Out of the 77 or so schools, 75 of them were either using Zoom or transitioning to Zoom. There was one that was still doing data collection and one that had transitioned to Teams. And the gentleman said something that was really, really interesting, and I'm going to apply that to the Google Meet, Google Classrooms / Zoom conversation. He said, look, we recognize that Teams is not a good fit for us. However, we also recognize that we have the technology staffing and resources to allow us to fill the gaps, so that instead of us having to pay more for additional tech, we could do it through process, human, help desk, training, however, soever. As much as I loathe telling teachers about training, I loathe it. I hate the idea that you have to keep training people like it's Pavlov, notwithstanding. So that for them, that was the case. But then he bottom lined it like this. He goes, look, you can't compare Microsoft Teams and you cannot compare Zoom. And in many ways, I'm going to say the same thing to you all with Google Classrooms, Broad, and Zoom. Google Classrooms attempts to be a mini LMS learning management system for those who are not so familiar, in the vein of Moodle or Canvas, while it also has the ability to have some form of web conferencing and collaboration, like Blackboard does with Blackboard Collaborate, and so forth and so on. Comparing Google Classrooms to Zoom, it's akin to comparing Facebook video. So everybody by now should know Facebook has a video calling feature. Well, if we're going to have that conversation, let's just throw Facebook in and WhatsApp video and everything else. You realize it gets really unwieldy very quickly. But this is to quote the gentleman, pound for pound, if we were putting the platforms next to each other, as far as video conferencing goes, specifically for the needs of education, Zoom has proven itself primarily because it was built for education in many ways. Their upstream major markets are education, health and national security, but they don't ever talk to me about the last one. So yes, it was built for that purpose. So for instance, in today's meeting, one of the little things I noticed is that Marlon and his reps have allowed you all to unmute your microphones if you so want to jump in with a question. So for instance, in my situation in UTT, a faculty member, a teacher is able to schedule their meetings for themselves. It's completely self-serve in the same way you'd walk into your classroom and begin to teach. But all of the tools are there that allows them to mirror their classroom almost one-to-one. While I say all of that, and while I'm saying that Zoom is pound for pound, if you strip it down to just video conferencing, the better video conferencing tool of the two, really the question boils down to ecosystem. And outside of the private schools in Trinidad and Tobago, the real question for me is less to principals, school supervisors, and teachers, but more to the ministry. For the history of Trinidad and Tobago, since I was in khaki pants, the Ministry of Education has instructed all on what shall be taught, not taught, when taught, how taught, which books, everything. For the first time during this pandemic, we've kind of gotten well, use what you could use, do what you could do. That by itself says volumes to me. The question will boil down to what platform is the ministry going to support and stand behind, provide guidance on, and everything else. There are some upsides to Zoom that definitely they outweigh the Google conversation. I'm sure once I wrap this up and Marlon jumps in, we're going to get into some conversations about privacy and security and a couple other things that may seem to be unimportant, but actually really are. But yeah, that's the $1 million answer to the question, Marlon. Google or Zoom? If you're talking straight video conferencing, Zoom. But if you're talking about the design of a complete virtual learning ecosystem or learning space, taking into consideration all of the nuances of all of our schools and all of the members here for TTUTA today alone, it's not going to be a straight shoot like that. It's not going to be a straight shot like that. So I thank everyone for what I hope was a brief but informative presentation. Eka, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Waldron, for leading us, for helping us to really examine what is currently taking place in our learning spaces, and really leading us to ask and answer some thought-provoking questions. As we invite participants to field questions, please keep in mind that our time is limited and therefore you will be allowed to only ask one question at first. If, however, there is sufficient time, you will be allowed to field further questions. I will now open the floor for persons who may have questions for Mr. Waldron. You can use the raise hand icon, place your hands up, and persons on the committee will see your hands up and we can recognize you.
Marlon, I thought you were getting the ball rolling there for a second. I see you disappear.
Yes, Mr. Waldron, I have access to you. I really want this to be to give our members the opportunity to ask these questions themselves. We have been grappling with the whole idea of using different platforms. Some teachers, for instance, or some principals, administrators, for instance, have a preference in our platform and then mandating that everybody use that particular platform. From the teacher point of view, we as a teacher organization, we advocating that teachers could use what they are most comfortable with. As you said, it's the first time in the history of education, going as far back as Plato, that we have the opportunity to do what we think is best as the classroom teacher. Notwithstanding that, you also have to look at the other side. What happens to the student? Would a secondary school student, for instance, have to be en courant with 5 different platforms because his math teacher is using Zoom, his English teacher is using Google Meets, his science teacher is using the platforms from Schoolology, etc., etc. So where do we get the balance, and how do we get a balance?
All right, so you brought something up here that I actually had to take a note of because it's a brilliant point, which is, you know what? Everything comes with a plus and a minus, and the minus to this lack of standardization is what you just said. So from a purely technical perspective, all right, I can't speak to educators about education. I tread warily, Marlon, seeing some of my comrades and colleagues over the years looking at me with their still pictures. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm an instructional designer or anything else. So I wanna take this from my wheelhouse. If you say to me that we're using 4 different platforms in one school because different teachers and different comforts, and we're already lamenting the device situation for students and parents, I may add. My technician for my car, formerly called a mechanic, by the way, these are technicians now. There are more electronics in cars than you have in your computer. All right. He pulls me square in the garage today and goes, "Hey, Lyle, I need to talk to you about what else you do in life because I have 2 kids and I need to buy 2 computers." I'm like, Lord Father in heaven. Imagine what you're going to get for a budget laptop. And then you're going to say to that budget laptop, here are 4 video conferencing applications that are all going to be running in memory in the background. So even through that lens, Marlon, it's insanity in terms of resources and resource allocations. And these are things that we don't consider. So the upside to standards are we can have, in a broader, bigger, global sense, support for both student at home, teacher at school, principal down, and we have better resource allocation and use. But going back to that brilliant point about experimentation, we have 3 months now is a really, really, really good time for us to broaden out ourselves, as they would say in the small maxis up and down the islands, and get a sense of what really works well for your nuances and what does not. Now, I am one of the greatest champions of standards since I stumbled upon it many, many years ago. Usually when people hear standards, they cringe because it means I'm going to be forced to use something. That is not the case. Standards provide a central guideline, a central yardstick for everyone to be able to get to. There will always be an exception to standards. There was one primary school that I was, let me just say was, they may be in here somewhere, that I am in talks with still and, advising. And I asked them point blank, I'm like, well, look, can you document your situation well enough that you can hopefully carve out an exception either at the level of the ministry and or the level of your board, whatever your board may be. And it was something that perhaps was not even thought of as an option. In many ways, Marlon, sometimes when we are told, use this by whomsoever, the simplest question is the one that corrects that record, which is why? Because it can't be that we're going to use this thing because you said so, or you like it, or your son told you it's free. We have to perhaps take a moment. Yes, the place is burning down. Yes, we have to do this in the morning. Yes, tomorrow is class. We get that. Doing it wrong the first time doesn't mean anything other than the students are going to have a hard time when you have to do it over and do it right. And if this is about the kids, as it's supposed to be, then perhaps we need to take a moment and go, okay, what exists, what works, what doesn't work. But, to wrap this up though, but that still exists outside of the frame of this entire virtual learning space. That still is a discussion about one part, which is synchronous instruction, which is us here having this discussion. But after this discussion is done, where do we have our repository for our learning materials? This paper that I was referring to, does somebody have access to it? Is there so those questions then come into play. So even if I was in the morning, Marlon, to give every teacher in Trinidad and Tobago in every school an unlimited Zoom license to do as you please and speak for as long as you want to, the problem is far from solved. Yes, Nola. Nola has a question. And Yuva has his hand up as well.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Waldron. So very good to hear you in a professional talking this season. So I just want to, my kind of statement and a question. I just want to kind of reinforce what you've been saying here this evening in terms of having to standardize. I have done training for the last few months with some colleagues in some schools training to use Google Meet, Google Classroom, and it does get overwhelmed. I do understand the need for having a standardization being done across simply because, like you said,
Yuva, you're breaking up really badly and it just got progressively worse. So I got you up to, you have some comrades, you all are doing training in Google Meet.
right.
Right?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I got
Sorry.
you now. Better.
I'm on the move, so sorry about that. Um, what I'm just saying is that I just want to kind of like wholeheartedly agree with you in terms of like there's a need for standardization in terms of when you have because remember it's not just the students, we have to take it on the parents are also having to learn to help guide these
Yes.
kids,
Yes.
right, with software. And if you have if you have children trying to learn four different things, imagine how the parents are going to be able to learn four different things to
Correct.
keep an eye on for their children, right? So I just want to kind of share with my colleague this evening. Yes, I know it's very frustrating. I know it's a very difficult time for all of us. I am in here. That's why I tried to make myself available this evening to listen to this meeting. It is very helpful, and I do just want to share. I do try to share my professional advice and expertise when needed and when necessary, in terms of helping colleagues to understand the different learning environments that we have to use. And I can tell you for one, I utilize both Zoom and Google Classroom. I use Zoom for my technical field, and I use Google Classroom for my aging.
Yuva, sorry to jump in here so quickly because before we lose you and breaking up, I know you said you had a question. So somebody was asking if you could type it, but if you're on the move, you probably can't. You want to just shoot the question out real quick, and if I understand you, I'll repeat it for everybody to hear.
No. It wasn't a question.
Oh, okay. It was just
before.
the comment. Okay, right. I got you.
All right.
Beautiful.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuva. Just one point very quickly because it kind of came up with Marlon as well, which is the BYOD dilemma. 90% of service calls I have right now in UTT has nothing to do with our platform, Zoom, Media Site, Canvas, whatever. It has everything to do with my laptop can't connect to the internet, my webcam's not working, and everything else. Once you are asking families, and I'm now pulling back a little bit to look at this from a broad stroke view, so I'm not even getting into the granular who don't have a device or who live in Westmoreland or wherever and have all the devices. I'm saying to you, once we have people to deal with like this and the bring your own device phenomenon, we now have a whole different nature of support and engagement, including but not stopping with, for instance, you're coming into people's homes. You're asking, y'all are in my home right now. This is my music room. Y'all get to find out that, hey, Lyle likes music. He's got, all kind of cool equipment and stuff. Great. What you see in here is not your business, right? So in some ways, and I'm not going to lean all the way over to the egregious where, like the video that was circulating the other day, where the child's mother in the States walks into the room with absolutely no clothes on because she forgot. She's in her house, and she's accustomed in her house walking around with no clothes. And she walks right in front of the camera, and the whole class gets petrified, and the teacher starts bawling on the place. But guess what? We forget in the moment because we've not worked out policies and processes for these things that will happen. It's not a question if. Like Marlon there, who is easy for me to point out because he has his headphones and he's visible, I have headphones on as well. So the kid, the child, who is there petrified because his mother is to his right, naked as she's born, everybody can see, he's hearing the teacher shouting at him. Mother can't hear anything. Mom can't hear anything. She forgot. So we're going into people's homes. What does that mean? What does it mean from a device perspective? What does it mean from a life perspective? How then do things have to change? One other thing on the BYOD idea, it's unfathomable to me. I guess one of the things that horrified me is when I found out that first year, second year kids were like doing as much screen work as they were. It's insane. One of the reasons, for instance, I was told that, well, as a school, we opted for Google Classrooms over Zoom because we couldn't pay for Zoom licenses and blah, blah, blah. And I said, why you need Zoom licenses, though? Well, Zoom has a 40-minute time limit. Okay, what is the time for your class usually? How long do you think you should be on a screen with kids before you give them a break? 5 minutes, go to the bathroom, wash your hands, drink some water. I'm giving you a creative exercise. Go and find 5 things. We have creative writing coming up. Go and ask mom or dad if you could walk around the house and find 5 things that we're going to talk about in class. And during that time, you will reconnect to blah, blah, blah. And they were like, well, gee, Lyle, we didn't think about that. This period also requires innovation and creativity beyond the cliche buzzwords of innovation and creativity. All right. So that for me, it is unthinkable, even in higher education, to watch people sit for 3 hours behind a screen. The only time I did that was when I'm playing video games because I was a wayward child who was the worst in school. I was the worst student. That anyhow, let me know. I have a traumatized history at school, right? So to me, this requires for us to let's do all the cliches, Marlon. Think outside of the box. So if we're thinking outside of the box, and all I need is a tool for synchronous collaboration, then me personally, and this is not a recommendation nor an endorsement of it, I would have just used Zoom and done. Because there is no limitation that Zoom currently has that's going to stop you. I think the free account allows you to do a 40-minute call with up to 100 persons. Not too sure how many people in here have 100-person classes. Really not too sure. But yeah, there's a stretch. I can't see it. All right? So that, which brings me to the other side of the fence very quickly because I see Nola here in chat. And I'm glad to see the chat going on as it is. Well, I'm going to address that, Nola, directly. But for me, the biggest issue with Google Classrooms broadly, technology has a cost. Somebody is paying for the tech. Can anyone in chat just type real quickly how Google makes money? Like, somebody needs to tell me how Google makes money. Because if we don't, I would not like to believe Google is just being altruistic and donating Google Classrooms to all of us. Thank you, Keon Orr. Somebody, TTUTA better give Keon Orr like a t-shirt or a polo or something because the interaction is so dope. Yes, Keon, you are the product. You are the product. No, yeah, and a pin. I like that one, Keon. No, bigger than you being the product, Keon. In this case, what we are seeing is the children of the nation are the products. To facilitate this, let's use Google Classroom endeavor, what we did not think of, and again, the whole peer framework never came into play, and this is not on the backs of y'all as teachers. Y'all were thrown into the wilderness, into the fires, and told, make this thing work. As a non-technocrat, you say, okay, what I could use, and you thought about it as best as you can. While at the same time, I may add, you also have the ministry bringing pressure for conformity. So the ministry says we want you to sit in front of the screen for X amount of hours. Madness. But I digress. So it means that we now have 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 14-year-olds who now have Google Gmail accounts so that we could sign them up for classes. But what does that actually mean in terms of what Google does with emails? Anybody realizes that every time you log on to the internet, you get ads that were the last thing you're looking at on Amazon or this or that? Google literally reads your email. What are we creating for the generations, plural, of tomorrow in terms of their data mining and tracking? This is a country where we were directly implicated and affected by the Cambridge Analytica scandal. What are we doing? How does this work? Marlon does not have a budget for this active. I apologize, Marlon, for blowing the budget. So it goes. Somebody still owe me macaroni pie on this Grand Sunday, though. And I could go on and on and on there, Keon, but I think you catch my drift, as we would say. My issue is not, and it cannot be one of this technology versus this technology. But what we're talking about is this philosophy versus this philosophy. And best case scenario, here's what I have on the Zoom side. You create an account with whatever email you already have. It's not my business. As a matter of fact, the students don't even have to create an account. The only people who need to create accounts, in theory, are the hosts. Those are the people that are having the meetings or the classes. So there's a level of anonymity granted to the student. The student receives a link or links from the beginning of the semester for the whole year. They click on it, they go on, they do their thing. Zoom does not track these people, right? This is a part of they don't want to. Their business is not selling ads or whatever is the case. Microsoft, more so. I think there was a big scandal. Carrier comment here now. The other day when people restarted their computer and realized that Microsoft installed ads on their computers. It was crazy, but it was fun for me as a tech person because I get to say, told you so. That said, disclaimer, I am deep in Microsoft's ecosystem. I'm not even going to get started on that. I pay Microsoft too much money yearly. Kerry Brooms. While you're talking, I'm going to run back to the chat and just make sure I got everything over there. Kerry Brooms.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Waldron. Good afternoon, everyone.
Pleasant good afternoon to you.
I am liking this discussion so much.
I could see the grin on your face. It's hilarious.
Keon hit the nail on the head because I've been preaching data is the new oil. So, yeah, personal data is worth more than oil right now. And we have very nice, conscientious teachers who are trying to do their jobs as best as possible, not thinking about what information could be gleaned by a third party and, without them realizing it. But I want to go back to the issue of standardization.
Sure.
with a lack of standardization, there's always a certain level of chaos. I totally agree with that. But what will the Ministry of Education use to standardize is the big question.
Correct.
Because, and I am brave enough to say that they cannot call for standardization, because just like every teacher in Trinidad and Tobago was feeling their way around this cyber term, as it's being called now,
right,
the ministry and the agents of the ministry are feeling around as well. However, they don't give the impression that they're feeling around.
And you know, that would help them so much, Kerry, if they would just say, hey, look, we don't know what we're doing either. We have no clue.
Exactly. You know, it's like, it's like the parent who doesn't know the work, but, you know, you have to get it done. Come on, man.
Why?
So we need to do, the employer needs to do better than that. It's not about forcing persons to do it. It's about, we are all trying to figure this out together. So we need to do that. And because of the lack of policy, there can be no standardization right now. And correct. I don't want persons to leave this very informative session to say, TTUTA is saying that to use one or the other, or TTUTA is saying to standardize right now, because we simply do not have enough information, and there's no overarching philosophy that has been shared with us. So I want to make sure the participants understand that we are still saying we need to have more discussion, more research before we have a position on standardization.
I mean, and the proof,
thank you very much.
The proof, Kerry, also exists in that the longer we take to have the discussion means that we could have just had the discussion weeks ago. The mere fact that we're this far into this, 6 months, some now uncounting, or 5 months, or however long it is, and we've not had that discussion is more evidence that we could have had the discussion at any point in time. Just two things very quickly on the notion of standards. I say some people are going to bristle when they hear the word standard. Standard does not mean a jacket. It does not. It carves out, as you rightfully said, policy positions. It should do it in a data-driven way. It should do it in a consultative way. It should do it according to that peer framework that I mentioned before. But this is Trinidad, and you're very right. The ministry is in a difficult space where, and I say difficult not to let them off the hook, but they're in this difficult space where they can't just ups and say to you all, use this, even though they kind of did, but didn't really do that. So the chaos continues. What I would say, and again, this is not a TTUTA recommendation. I want to enforce that disclaimer as well, nor is it a Lyle Waldron recommendation. Don't say Lyle Waldron, tell it to say. But the reality is at the school level. So we understand that beyond the level of the school is chaos. You have your ecosystem, your fishbowl. It would actually make sense at this point, until and insofar the ministry steps up to the plate to do what they have to do, where schools may need to form committees, a digital committee, like they have leadership committees and administrative committees, and within the boundaries of the school, make a standard recommendation. In other words, like the gentleman whose name I forget already 2 seconds ago. I'm so bad at names, Marlon. Thank God I was working Marlon's. I know it was a Y. Yuva. There we go. Right? Like Yuva was saying. So these school level committees can discuss and say to the school, look, we don't have any guidance in the ministry. So all they could do all they want because we don't have no choice. But we've decided that we could do XYZ with Zoom or with Google Classrooms. Oh God, please don't do it. With Zoom or whatever else, right? And we could provide this documentation, this support. We have these people as teachers who have volunteered to provide technical assistance and so forth and so on. So at least within the fishbowl, within that singular ecosystem, we have an attempt at tapering down or taking down these broader issues we're going to have with parent and student and device and whatever is the case, to bring some modicum of sanity to the insane. Keon, you allowed a second question? I know the moderator, Eka ain't playing today, you know. Eka looking like she waiting on somebody to hit them the Donna Cox. Well, Keon, go brave, you know. You unmute your mic on your own, buddy.
It's okay, Keon. You can go ahead.
All right. Keon, I'm not taking it for you. I just telling you. I get enough bad up in life. Keon, unmute your mic. Talk to me. Let me see. I have 3 messages as well.
Right. I don't think I asked the first question. I just answered your whole question.
Oh, exactly. Okay. Technocrat number 1. Go ahead.
Yeah, man. Yeah, but question. Because I was really confused with the topic of the there, because I was thinking, wait, isn't it not a motorcycle and a car?
Yeah.
Or a car and a truck, you know? Because we separated in our school as asynchronous versus synchronous.
Right.
But what I want to ask you, wouldn't it not help Division of Education or Ministry to not classify these platforms, because you gave a good history of them, and understanding what the intention was will aid into how you can use it. Because Microsoft Teams to me feel more of an enterprise kind of thing, right? That's why you don't have the controls like Zoom, right? So what we will do in our school, we use Microsoft Teams, so like, let's say our disciplinary committee.
Right.
So everybody come together, and when they call in everybody. But they dare not use that for the classroom, and expect that you have the level of control that you normally have. Right? Unless you have a very disciplined class. What if some of us are now coming in?
There's no such thing as a discipline. There's no such thing as a discipline class.
Yeah, so I wanted you to tell me, I know you spoke about policies, you spoke about standards. Can we just merge it too? Do you recommend that we just merge it too and say, hey, what? We should use Teams for this, Zoom is good for that, and LMS, Google, because we already have an LMS. I think Moodle is now coming with a division. Do you recommend that?
So you're not going to get a recommendation out of me straight face, Keon. We in the presidential debates in the States, I'm going to do the bob and weave like Joe Biden, right? So you ain't getting that from me. I'm never going to shout at you like Donald Trump, just as a heads up. Here's what you are going to get from me. So you are right on all counts. Whether you're quoting me or not, your mind was in the right space. Specifically, every one of those tools came from a different background. Of course, Teams coming from something called Microsoft Link, which was before Teams, it was called Skype for Business. Before Skype for Business, it was called Link. And then when they moved from Link to Skype, they wanted to make everything Skype because they thought people knew about Skype. Skype for Business bossed the same way. It didn't make any sense. And before Link, it was something called Conference XP or some nonsense like that. This is called an opportunity, a crisis. I can't remember who the quote was, and I guess I should have put the quote up as well because I love quotes. Never let a good crisis go to waste. If you were Microsoft right now, is this not great? Everybody's stuck at home, and you could convince them to use your thing, and then you have to pay money and blah, 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 blah. Here's the issue at the end of the day, right? Again, even if we have a teacher or teachers, because of legitimate, nuanced dealings in Maruga Primary or wherever, who had to change platforms, that's less the issue. The issue is what and where is this central standard going to come from? Now, it would mean that the ministry or whomsoever, the technocrats doing that internal consulting, right? Because that's how I see myself in both universities I've worked with over the years, is that I am but a consultant for my clients, being my faculty and my students and whatnot. So that technocrat is going to have to sit down, take in all this disparate information, and come up with a platform that is as low bandwidth as possible, because we're going to have people like, I forget the guy's name again, Lyle Waldron and names, so Yuva, right? Who was driving on a phone. So forget the driving part. Well, I assume he driving. He might be taking a little run, a little walk, exercise. My COVID belly, I ain't right. So, but he's using mobile data, which in Trinidad, depending on where you are, Toco, Sanssouci, Port of Spain, differs. So that technocrat has to take that information in. 1. Secondly, device penetration. 2. Thirdly, content is that the case. There is a reason, ladies and gentlemen, that there is no singular silver bullet, Keon, which is why you can't get this answer from me, where there is platform X that university Y or school system, Z is using anywhere in the world. Nobody does it. Nobody's using Teams, which I may add is not a video conferencing platform. It's a collaboration platform. Two different things. So even if I'm going to recommend Microsoft Teams for y'all, I have to sit down with people like y'all in a smaller focus group. We may have to run a 3-month pilot because I need to answer to y'all what the negatives in Teams are. So there's some things in Teams that were designed for business communication, like Slack and those other tools that I don't want to get too technical. How would that impact classrooms? How does that impact plagiarism? How does that impact student-to-student communication? How can the teacher deal with educational administration and classroom administration? Listen to me. One of the greatest things about Zoom, for me, I want to, because again, this is not a Zoom, it's not a bash other Zoom thing. But the level of virtual classroom management that exists in the Zoom platform to me is unfathomable. I've sat in enough classes watching Raymond Hackett and Arthur Joseph speak about education administration, and the sense I got was, you know what, if you have a chaotic classroom in the physical sense, there will be no learning, right? So if Lyle Waldron sits in the back just bawling, you can't teach a thing. There will be no math, there will be no comment. All you hear is Lyle Waldron mouth, which reminds me when I throw a rootie on the board, and we don't have that discussion. So it is key to understand that those things matter. Now, to technocrat X in MOE, they don't know that. They don't have that nuanced understanding. So if they were just to come and say, Keon, use Teams, or Keon, use this, or Keon, use Zoom, even Zoom with all those tools, without a properly designed policy framework, process framework, supporting documentation. So again, I give you as an example, I like to stay in Macrise, Keon, I can stay in Macrise. In UTT, I manage a staff of 2 people. We have 7,500 students and 350 active faculty this semester. Yeah, just 2 people, right? You would imagine that. This is travesties. I'm threatening to resign for the 5th time right now, so don't worry about it. I will deal with them. Last year, for the last academic term ending in September of 2020, so September 2019 to now, the 3 of us served and supported 11 million minutes of meetings. We served and supported 26,000 classes with 220-some thousand participants. How with 3 people we do that? Easy. Processes and policies. And in many ways, Keon, that's what they're paying me to do. To sit down as the manager, design. What managers? We manage resources. To design my ecosystem built around all those things. Now, some new things cropping up because BYOD is now my reality because everybody at home using the devices. So, unlike primary and secondary, so this is not for that. We, for instance, would say, hey, look, ideally, if you could not use your phone to log into a class, we'd prefer it. This is why these are the guidelines, these are the policies. We do understand that, again, standards come with carve-outs. So there may be a student who is, not as well endowed as everybody else in terms of budgets and technology and money. And you as a teacher, Keon, you know the student, you know their financial situation. You can easily come to academic council or to your program professor and say, hey, look, this Lyle Waldron fella, he bright, but he only have a phone and know the policy is XYZ. This is what I've seen, He not playing the fool. Could we carve an exception? Take your stamp and go. So again, I use that as an example just to say that standards matter, how they develop it matters, and no, it's not a jacket for everybody. But solid question, Keon. I had 2 things in chat I wanted to touch very quickly. Wendy Castle, I've been trying to convince my colleagues to stop sitting in front of the screen all those long hours to no avail. I've also told them that the students shouldn't be doing that for long as well. Yeah, there's something called the 20-20-20 rule. There's no way we could abide by it now, but so it goes. We're not abiding by it right now. 20 minutes of screen, 20 minutes of not screen, 20 minutes of something. I can't remember. I don't take it on. But if we use the 20-20 rule as a baseline, then the 4-hour rule of ministry or 5-hour rule of whatever secondary is not going to cut it. Okay? TTUTA cannot pay for glasses for everybody. It's just Marlon don't have the budget for pin and polo, so you're not getting glasses. Although Zenny Optical Marlon, cheap, $500, you get a pair of frames. It's good to go. I'm just advertising billboard. It's crazy.
I use them also. So yeah.
Very quick one from Jolene here. Jolene is asking, would it be feasible for a primary school, to use one platform as you're saying about the students in high school? What about the parents that have more than one child at the school and need to educate themselves of all different platforms? Very quickly, Jolene, that's why I said we have nothing coming from the top technocrats. The current Minister of Education just assumed the post. Let's understand that when she came into this, whatever was planned way before she was even on the cards to be the Minister of Education. I actually grant her much grace, and I have a ton of respect for the lady, because she didn't come in and go, or let her hand into it with me. She came in, went on every television platform, radio platform, and said, we will fix it. I'm going to do what I could do. And whether or not we've had tangibles after that, leadership is a tough thing. And it's easy to Sunday armchair to Monday morning quarterback the next day and say, well, Dr. Gatsby should. So I give her that much. The ministry and the technocrats that you hear me talk about is where I keep my focus, right? Instead of trying to get so pseudo-political. So again, ideally, we're talking about from the top, Julie. We should really get this standard across the board, and we have the carve-outs. So it means that if, as a parent, I have a child in primary and a child in secondary, and the different classes, or even in the same school, or even different schools, we generally have an understanding of how this thing works and where we go in, and there's a central LMS, and we're using Zoom, and it's one thing across the board. We don't have that right now. So then at the level of the school, at least, maybe perhaps we could say, okay, I have 2 kids in the school, they're in the same thing. I have 2 kids in 2 different schools, they're kind of in different things, but at least it's 2 things, 2 moving parts. Once we get beyond that, it's chaos for everybody. So it's a really reasonable point you're making there, Jolene. I thank you for that question. Yes. Okay. So, Cheryl, I got through that one. Ayodele, can Zoom allow you to be presenting a slide or video on the screen at the same time and see the students in live screen? Yes. Again, classroom management, things second to none. Listen, I stumbled onto Zoom by total happenstance in 2015. I was in Las Vegas, just came out of presenting at the People in Them conference on something about classroom design, more than likely. And I got a phone call from my boss in UTT who's saying to me that our video conferencing platform at the time just went kaput. A company called Video, VIDYO. And he's explaining to me it's going to take 2 weeks for FedEx to carry the thing. I'm like, what? And I turn around and there's this big word behind me called Zoom. I say, hey, listen, I'll call it back. I walk into the booth, I shake some guy's hand. White guy's like, hey, Lyle. I'm like, hey, white guy. The rest is history. We got a demo for like 6 months, and ever since we just kept going. Fantastic platform. You see the classroom management aspect of it? So for instance, let me tell you some of the things that we encourage faculty to use. I use Zoom for consultation and instruction that I do on the side because I do music education. So breakout rooms, the ability to say, just like you would when I was in primary school and I was in secondary school, okay guys, work in groups of 3, blah, 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 I want to put you all together, just turn around and we could do that. Muting microphones before they come in. So even when you schedule your class, you could say, hey, okay, everybody's microphones stay muted when they enter the room. When you come in here right now, you all have the ability to unmute yourselves. Oh, somebody turned it off. Haha, not anymore. Marlon, I was going to tell you when I call it, right? But I didn't want to make out the scene. I don't like to be foreseen. So, right. When I first came into the room, I did my digital assessment. I'm like, this is insanity, but, you know, it's not my meeting. Let me hush my little mouth. But again, little things like that matter. Then now is this big security panel in Zoom where we could allow participants to share screen and this, that, the other, whatever is the case. I've had complaints from faculty. Listen to me. I was, again, just real quick, I was the worst child like ever, right? Sweet boy, but troubled. And these kids are annotating over the people's slide while they're trying to teach. I like, serious? They just do that? They're like, yeah. I like, well, Miss So-and-so, to be fair, you're a little shaky, you know, and they could see you shaky, so you go get that behavior. So here what? Look, so, thing this, here's this PDF, this self-serve document, this how you rah. Please go into your settings, turn on annotation thing, so that way when Lyle Waldron draw, it comes up with a big Lyle Waldron. So not only, we want to encourage that kind of collaboration between students, but we don't want it in a nuisance mode. So if I be in a nuisance, put me in the waiting room for a timeout. You could do that too. So again, all of these things that almost one-to-one replicate the physical to virtual transition, while at the same time being cognizant that this is not a one-to-one experience. Now we need to get creative. How do I get submissions from students for homework? This is I'm seeing parents picking up packages, dropping into school, this, that. So it's almost like triple work for teachers now. This can't be the way. But that's a thing by itself. So yes, Ayodele, I hope I answered that question. What about a combination of both Zoom and Google Classrooms? Listen, anybody could design their virtual ecosystem however they need to design it. That's one way to do it. For me, Hafiza, where we should be right now, and this is where we should be hard, I don't ever really make hard recommendations. The Ministry of Education should have a working and reliable Moodle server. I can't understand for the life of me why that thing is crashing every 5 minutes. I'll give you as an example. PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, which is one step down from the WHO, PAHO and CAFA, who is below PAHO, they're responsible for public health education in their regions. So for CAFA, it's Caribbean, and for PAHO, it's basically everything south of Mexico. The Moodle admin, web admin guy from PAHO that I met some years ago, nice Colombian guy, he's like, yeah, we get like 1.2 million page hits a day. I'm like, 1.2 million page hits a day? He go, yeah, don't crash. Crash? Where's that? I go, well, this makes sense. Amazon don't crash just so. YouTube don't crash just so. So then what is all they do? Again, Mr. Technocrat guy in the ministry who probably said to whomsoever with the pressures coming down from the top, we need XYZ, rah. Well, I have a server there, I can install Moodle, and no, this is 2020. I'm almost 100, my heart beating in my body, my gut feeling, I have a big gut, says to me, there's a server somewhere in iGov or in the ministry in a corner that somebody masquerading and lying and telling the big people and them that this is a Moodle server. That's not how it works. So the end result of that is we have 1,000 and something schools that basically see Moodle as a bad thing, Natasha, right? As a bad thing, Hafiza. So I would say hard, we need to have Moodle as the LMS. What we use as a synchronous tool, we could have some discussions and debate on. The government of Trinidad and Tobago needs to stop dealing with a lot of these digital things in these pockets as they are. As a nation, economically, we are sending money to Zoom, we are sending money to all these companies, but we're doing it piecemeal. What we're paying for Zoom, for instance, in UTT is 50% less than what UE pays because I'm on the case. If the ministry wanted me on the case, I could probably get us down to 25% because I don't have that kind of volume, Marlon. I just don't. But again, there are frameworks that could be designed and rolled out, Hafiza, that could facilitate whatever synergies we have. One last thing. So we talk about asynchronous in terms of documents, PDFs, PowerPoints, and whatnot, right? The LMS itself and whatever you type in the LMS. We talk about synchronous as Zoom, Google, Teams, whatever. What about the recording of teaching content, and where shall that be saved in an asynchronous mode? I'm not seeing anything else about that. That's a whole different Sunday school. We're not dealing with that. Anything else in chat very quickly? Right, Hafiza, asynchronous. All your signing with your full name, please. Hafiza, great to know that you've married the two. As I said, my primary concern with Google Classroom is the data mining and the position that we're putting these children in. If we have children, some as young as 5 years old now with a Google account that Google is reading their email, and you're like, well, they're not actually doing email, don't worry about it. What it means is that Google now has a 10-year head start on advertising to these children. You cannot fathom in the digital age what that means in 2030, because we don't know what's going to happen in 2030. I don't know if we're going to be using AR or VR, and Google now has, like, this data, y'all, is almost like a psychological pattern of insight. Kind of like Captain America in the Avengers, where they were trying to work out this whole Project Insight. It's the same thing. So I'm very wary of Google Classrooms for that reason, less the functionality side of it. That to me is a big deal. How can Zoom handle? Okay, so Paul, Zoom is not an asynchronous learning tool. It's not. It's not supposed to be. It's not meant to be. My question back to you, sorry to answer a question, my poor grandmother rolling in her grave, is how are you handling paying Google for that asynchronous learning tool? Because in theory, your recordings will go on YouTube, which is the Google platform. In theory, Google Classroom is where you have your LMS. And in theory, asynchronous learning is happening through Google Meet. Google has a camera looking into your house and they could see stuff. Anybody has an Android phone and could shout out, hey Google right now? Those headphones that Marlon have on look like the Bose headphones. If they are, Marlon is very, very dope. No, Marlon, I don't have Bose budgets. But if they were, Marlon could just sit there and shout out, hey Alexa, or hey Google, what is 2 times 2? Why does that matter? If you're letting Google see inside you, and this is not paranoia levels, it's just fact of the matter. If you're letting Google see and hear your interactions inside your house, it's totally different from letting somebody else do it. Because in particular, that's how they harvest data. So again, Paul and everybody else, for me, that's less of the issue. It really is. Specifically, what you can do on Zoom that you can't do on Google, nothing. And there's probably little that you can't do on Teams that you can't do on Google or Zoom. I weekly download Teams feature updates. They do weekly feature updates. And the map is basically make Teams into Zoom. It basically is that. Make Teams into Zoom. Unfortunately, for Microsoft, they don't have an underpinning understanding of education. So while on the surface, they now have breakout rooms, for instance. They have breakout rooms, but you still can't schedule a meeting and turn off the mics before people enter. You still have classroom management issues. You could see more than 4 people on the screen. And like it's a lot of cosmetic top-end things. So it's problematic at best in that regard. So yeah, everybody in the chat, just are going broad now, broad. Zoom does not do any asynchronous teaching. It's not what it's for. Never has, never will. Yes, Google Classroom is your silver bullet that will do all of it. When anybody promises you everything as a silver bullet, be wary. Tis all. Tis all. Let me see. Packages, yes, you're probably better off with packages. Zoom, place in waiting room, re-enter. Yes, it's a timeout. You don't want them to miss a session, correct. Google permission to re-enter. You need an email to sign into Zoom too. No, you do not, Hafiza. You do not. And again, I want to make this clear. With technology, we get into dogmas, right? So I'm an Apple person. I'm a Samsung person. Let's not let this devolve into Google versus Zoom. They're both tools that both do really good things. Now, if you're paying for G Suite, mind you, if you're paying for G Suite, you're still paying for Google to read the email, which is insane. But at least you know what's funding your experience. When you're not paying for the Google Classroom suite, we know how they're going to make their money back off of you, and the kids in particular. And I know for some that's not a big of a deal. Okay, I'll talk to you all in about 5 years again. We'll have that discussion. And you're not going to like it then at all. You do as Keon said again, if you have access to the technology and you're not paying for the product, you are the product. Let that not fall on its ears. Now, somebody, brilliant person, Marlon, said to me, well, Lyle, then why does Zoom give you free? Couple of points to note. Video is the most resource intensive thing we could do with computers right now, probably short of artificial intelligence and a couple other things. I think they say right now 80% of web traffic is video between like Netflix and YouTube and them kind of things. Video is a big deal, which is why Zoom don't give it to you for free for forever. You get that 40 minutes and you cut. Get the servers a time to rest. What does Zoom get from you running their meetings for 40 minutes? They get data in the form of usability and in the form of problems. A lot of the outages, like I have the subscription on my US number for Zoom text messages when I have like failures and whatnot. They come from the free realm because there's so many people using it. If there's a particular issue, screen share wasn't working or whatever is the case, Zoom is now able, they basically have a free labor force of all of these people using the software package and the service for free that will report to them and say to them, hey, this thing ain't working, fix it. And usually within a couple hours, we had a big Zoom outage here, it was quite hilarious. It's like 4 hours it was down. In those 4 hours, they get more complaints from the people who not paying than the people who pay. People like me who pay, and I get email. Yeah, we down, we'll let you know. Okay. So I ain't even gonna look until it come back. I send out an email to all faculty. Zoom down, chill out, relax, go and drink some chai tea and, look at the sunset, refocus your eyes in the distance. Be free people. Oh, no, they don't get an email. So they hanging down and Zoom likes nothing better. That's how free works on Zoom. That matters. Show me a platform that does not collect data and show a platform that doesn't exist. They all do. No, that's wrong. But I understand you feel that way, and that's okay. I'm going to validate your feeling. No, all platforms don't just willy-nilly collect data because we say so. The majors, we do know, collect a lot of data. Facebook in particular, because they now own Instagram, WhatsApp, a couple other things. Google, well, this is what they do for a living, ads. But take, for instance, Microsoft to a lesser extent. Take, for instance, Apple. Apple don't collect user data. And that's actually like a big thing for them. Don't do it, They hallmark themselves on privacy. Of course, we could poke holes in any of their arguments, but, it's a thing. For the people that are going to say he's an iPhone user, don't trust him. This is my iPhone. This is my Samsung Note 9. Let's not have that discussion either. All right? So, but yeah, far too often, because again, what I'm seeing from some of these responses is, don't attack my Google Meet. My Google Classroom is great for me and the kids. Yes, great. Enjoy. Just be aware. Not even be wary. Just be aware. Consequences, unintentional, sometimes play a bigger role than the consequences intentional. How will I rate the use of WhatsApp as a learning platform? You know what, Kendall? I would rate that like -10. Up until I heard about situations where children didn't have access to anything else. I was like, serious? Yeah, right, Keon? It's a messaging platform. I know of a school with a particular teacher that has a particular situation that she cannot speak to the ministry about because, again, the technocrats will just write this off and, they're like the trolls and all the kids' storybooks back in the days now. But she's legitimately designed, and as somebody who does platform design, I was amazed. I listened to her in depth and I went, okay, yeah, you got to go. What's up with this? She's like, no, but Mr. Waldron, I thought you said, I go, you did all the things in terms of design. All of the benchmarks are there. Now, the good news for her is she's not designing for a school or for multiples, so there were some elements in pairing up that she didn't have to do. But I said, listen to me, I pulled out, my library is right next to me here. I pulled out my design Bible, and I showed it to her, and I said, listen to me, you're good. Trust me, you're fine. I didn't even think you could do the things that she figured out on WhatsApp and how to process, how to this, how to that. Parents are already familiar with XYZ. They know how to this, they know how to that. Voice notes for this, send videos for that. She actually has a more robust way right now for submission of projects and whatnot because of things like WhatsApp voice notes and WhatsApp video than I've seen from people fighting up with things like Google Classroom. So a couple of my friends' sons had to buy whiteboard slates so they could thing and then hold it up to the camera because digitizing handwriting is a thing, but it's not really a thing, and everybody don't have an iPad or a touchscreen computer, and it got really messy. She don't have them worries. Parent stands up with phone, WhatsApp, video, child draws, writes, whatever is the case, parent releases finger, video is sent to her, evaluation done. I'm like, okay, you thought of this thing well. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kian, I'll pull it in a second. So, I mean, amazingly so, what you, again, as I said to Keon and I said at the beginning, what you're not going to get from me is, this is good, this is bad. The only flag I have raised, and it's a legitimate flag, and we can't say, well, everybody collects data, therefore, that's legitimate too. Somebody can legitimately feel that way. It is not straight, but we could feel that way. Feelings, feelings. But yeah, the one flag is, if you're not paying for this thing, who is? And how are they? And in the case of the kids, they are paying for it. They may not be paying for it right now, but last I checked, Island Finance is getting money too, and they don't make you pay for it right now. And nobody in their right mind wants to deal with Island Finance. So the digital version of Island Finance may not be what you want to do to these poor children and parents who are none the wiser. Just see. Just see.
All right.
Yeah, okay, nice design Bible. Good stuff. Yeah, you can. Again, just before we jump into let's use WhatsApp. Just keep in mind that if you can figure it out as a part of a reasonable process, then, and it works every time. So it's like math, right? If you figure out a formula, the formula has to work every time. If it don't work once, it's not a formula. It can't work. It's kind of the same thing here. If you could figure out if this thing works, and it works well, again, in your nuance and situation, then what we would have here in the thesis of standards is a carve-out. How come I cannot access the video recordings at the end of Zoom sessions? So, Urshel, I'm not too sure if you're talking about the tutor recordings or your recordings on your computer. The ones on your computer, if you're saving on your computer, it's somewhere in your documents folder or something like that. It's not that taxing of a thing to find. You could get some assistance on that in like 2 seconds. Give me a second. Support.zoom. By the way, Zoom is one of the most robust support sites I've ever seen. If you all want to see two scary things in life, one, an artificial intelligence just wrote an essay to mankind. I mean, men. I don't want to be sexist. Couple weeks ago, it was an interesting essay. It is a full essay, and I may add, it was well written. Touch my heartstrings. This is artificial intelligence. This is not a person echo. This is AI did this. If you also want to see AI at work, go to support.zoom.us and ask the artificial intelligence bot a question. If you're having a problem, ask them the question, and you'll see AI at work. So, yes, Eka, Marlon, we good. Final questions, anybody? Now is the time. When I open my documents, no audio or video. Urshel, I could always try to help you separately and quickly, but I may put you on the place where you need to go to answer them questions. Right. Oh dear, I'm in the wrong.
Thank you again, Mr. Waldron.
No worries.
Colleagues in education, we have come to the end of our program. Sincerest gratitude to our presenter, Mr. Lyle Waldron, for taking time out on a Sunday afternoon to ensure that teachers are informed. Thank you to Mr. Seals and the Tutors Professional Advancement Committee for planning and executing today's program. A special thank you also to our participants. And remember, same place, same time next week for our final installation of our series, Sunday School. Good afternoon, and back to you, Mr. Seals.
All right, thank you, Eka. Again, I will like, on behalf of the officers of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, I'd like to thank you, Lyle. I will be contacting you because I have a little problem or a little situation. It's not a problem. It's a little situation that I need to sort out. And let me say this, I'll put Lyle on the spot right now. Lyle was instrumental in the in getting us UTT, and so that whole very successful joint district convention event that we had about 2 weeks ago, Lyle was a big part in helping us get that institution, getting the bandwidth, dedicated bandwidth and all that, so that we didn't have, we moved seamlessly in that event. So Lyle, thank you very much. Thank you to my team. I have a team of persons who are on the PAC. I mentioned them before. If I forgot out any names, I apologize. And also working with us, Month of the Teacher Committee. Members of the Month of the Teacher Committee is in the house. Again, our second VP, Tobago officer, General Secretary. We have a big team today, Lyle, because I tell them that, you know,
Yeah, boy.
Big man in the business coming through. All right, so I will end here, but I have a surprise for you guys. Next week, well, this week was supposed to be the last of the Sunday School series, but the Tobago officer got the some persons, the John Maxwell trained persons help us deal with motivation. They will be coming to next week, please God. And so through his intervention, we have a John Maxwell session next week. It's free for you all, right? Free for the association too, I must add. Keon, I will get that pin to you, right? And persons, please have a productive week. What you are doing is good enough. In most cases, what you are doing for your children in these times, trying to reach out for them, there are one or two persons who can step up the pace, but by and large, we know what you are doing is enough. Please be secure in that, and your union tutor will support your efforts going forward. Thank you. Have a blessed week and a productive week. Thank you all. Bye.